Paydaayesh, a Persian word that has many possible translations. Discovery, recovery, to make anew, to come into existence. The most appropriate, perhaps, is creation. In the spring of 2006, on Siena College campus, 7 actors and 4 professional artists from various fields began a collaboration to tell one story of creation through motion, sound, and light. This creation project was reinvented, performed, and documented over 2 months, giving form to this story.
There is these 2 worlds, the world of darkness, the world of light, with a god of darkness and god of light in the center of each. The first thing that happens is the god of darkness wants to know what's going on around his world, and as such, he moves. And of course, the curiosity translates into motion, translates into waves, and the waves go all the way to the edge of the 2 worlds and awaken the god of light, who now needs to defend himself. As a result of this awakening, there is the creation of all these various demigods. Then the demigods move into discovering the new world. And at one point, a group of demigods of darkness attack and eat pieces of the demigod of light. And as such, there are pieces of light imprisoned within the darkness. And in order to release those, the god of light creates this wonderfully beautiful demigods, goddesses, who dance naked in front of the demigods of darkness, and they release themselves, and their droppings fall on the world below, which is the earth. And thus each dropping becomes one human being, making the point that human beings are indeed a combination of light and dark.
As I listened to Mahmoud tell the story of this ancient myth, the final imagery were these droplets of light coming down. I could see all kinds of possibilities from a movement orientation.
Many of the moments of the choreography was really built right there and then in rehearsal. We decided that we are going to see what our actors are capable of doing. Choreograph based on what they can do and then move them and hopefully an inch or 2 further.
I think that they took your ability or inability to be very graceful and turn that into whatever you interpret it as.
Sometimes I feel like saying, what do you want? Tell me what you want. You know, like, what do you want me to do? I didn't get it sometimes. Things were just very unclear. I mean, it was coming together as we were doing it.
What made me the most proud about being in the show was when I asked, could you tell that I wasn't a dancer, that these moves were my own, there was no training? She said no.
I just thought that was extraordinary. This is going to really be cool.
It's always difficult to translate an original idea to a practical presentation. The funny thing is that everybody has their own story. They have what they want to put on the stage, what they see should happen. These are all artists, yet it is theater, yet there is a director, yet there is somebody who has got to make a decision. And sometimes these decisions are conflicting with one's inner feelings, one's idea about the production. Those are the moments that we really need to work through.
It can be difficult when people are not flexible, because you can be flexible and still maintain your goals, your standards, your aesthetic, but there has to be a give and take, and there has to be an ability to listen.
Ellen is a choreographer, so she thinks things out in her head. She sees how the dance should be, and then she goes step by step toward making that happen. I think it was a little difficult for her in this process that she didn't know what the end result is going to be, and we had to build step by step. Stefan, on the other hand, had come up with a very distinct, almost exact idea as to how the music is going to be. So for Stefan, the difficulty was to give in to the 2 of us more.
Stefan was fun to be around. He had everyone playing with the instruments and finding different ways, and he was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. He really got into it.
My role was to provide the text for the event. That was sort of my primary role, principal thing that I did. But I was at a lot of rehearsals in which we were dealing with text, but I was also at a lot of rehearsals where we were dealing with the movement and direction and structuring of the story and those kinds of things. So my role in that sense was really to be a collaborator with the other people and contribute where I could, and where I could wasn't defined.
The collaborators were great to work with. I know that if I had trouble or anything, I could go to any one of them, and they all had their one expertise.
It was good that each person had a direct part of the show to go after.
This 45 minutes belongs to Mahmoud. This belongs to Stefan. This belongs to Brother Gary. Their willingness to do that, I think, was quite extraordinary.
I wanted to say this during the ACTF, and she said, well, how was it having, 2 or 3 different directors? And I was like, I could take a break for 5 minutes. It's just like, you guys are figuring it out, I'm just going to sit here and take a break.
I remember one exercise that you felt pressure coming at you. Mahmoud was like, I want you to discover like your human body. Brother Gary's like you gotta use the text. And then Stefan said oh, you gotta go through the stages of language development. And you're like, it's all coming together.
I am one of those people who believe that directing is just as much of a creative work as acting, as writing. So a director, for me, is an additional playwright. Just like a playwright begins the process of writing a play by having an idea and then going through it moment by moment through trial and error and learning and establishing things that work, I like to do the same thing in my directing.
Mahmoud's directing style, it's a little eccentric at times, and sometimes the activities that he has us do would be a little bit hard to follow. He kind of goes around the issue and then comes back into it.
A lot of people think he's utterly out there and wacky, and he is, obviously. I mean, he does sometimes take an unusual approach, but somehow he and I work very well together.
Once you understood where he was going with things, he was very helpful, and he knew where he wanted you to go.
It's very rare that I know exactly what would happen in one rehearsal process or in the rehearsal period. Yet I have an overall idea as to what I would like to see at the end. So working towards that involves tremendous amount of openness and availability to being vulnerable.
He made it depend on you more, how far you wanted to take it.
Mahmoud and I seemed to have a little bit of chemistry. We could really just sort of flow back and forth and back and forth and back and forth because he's movement oriented. He's not just a dialogue person. We seemed to spew ideas. One idea would flow from another to another. That was very exciting.
He's an energetic director, but he just gets a little too crazy / violent / scary. I actually almost got hit over how bad of an actor I am.
He's getting soft. There were some situations where I was very surprised, where he was lax. He just sort of surrendered power. He let students make our silly student mistakes.
Mahmoud Karimi-Hakak has one crazy mind. I laughed when he talked about the demigods releasing their seed to the earth and all. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be in for one hell of a ride. Fucking yeah.
We knew that there is going to be 3 worlds in here. Obviously, there is the world of gods, demigods, humans. There is also the world of darkness, light, and the combination. And there's also the retelling of God creates, demigod creates human, human create God. The idea of triangle came about very early on. And then, one day Stefan came in and talked about this Triskelion. We all decided that we're going to do some research about it. And once we did the research, we realized that Triskelion is almost in every single myth and every single tradition. Triskelion allows for the movement. It's not as sharp as a triangle.
As soon as this concept was introduced, people were saying, this really is interesting because it has all of the unending kind of thought processes. It has the circular thought process versus the linear thought process.
I understood the symbolism behind it. I understood the symbol of eternity. It worked for what it was. It was simple. It was easy enough to maneuver. I wish more time was put into it. It came up a bit later, and we had a lot of revisions up until the very end of the show.
I've certainly worked on a number of sets that had basically arena staging, that had challenges for movement and things like that. To me, you always do that with a set. You always have to figure out how do you move your actors on it, what's safe, what's artistically interesting and engaging, and those kinds of things. So I think it was developed for the piece and it served its function. So I don't think it was that unusual a set as sets go.
The set ate people and took Maeve's life. It was weird at first, especially when we only had one leg that was like smooth to practice on, really like rough around the edges, and you'd like bang into it.
The most important thing when you're working with a prop or a set or a costume, it has to become your living partner. It can't become something you have to deal with or a non-responding entity. On the last evening, one of the dancers was seriously injured. It was in the middle of a very physical scene. I saw her land. She didn't get up. She kept crawling. Then she sort of left. Kellyanne at that point in time was Maeve's partner. And I could see Kellyanne trying to interact with her and then recognizing internally, okay, Maeve's going to leave. And Kellyanne just turned around and got back into the mix.
I think it's pretty amazing how seamlessly the actors covered for it. You can't do that with every show. And they just stepped up, and a good chunk of the audience never knew that somebody dropped away.
It didn't surprise me that they were able to make this production happen. I think it says a lot for their intelligence, of their sense of ownership, for their maturity, because they did not panic. They felt that they could still make this happen.
That was a wonderful experience. Being a part of something that I would never, ever, ever be a part of. Something so strange and beautiful and unusual, and people I met and who I became. So to push myself to a level that I never could ever imagine myself doing was pretty exciting.
It was really a show that came into its own because of the actors and because of the collaborators. I don't know if I'll ever experience something that was just completely organic like that again.
You got it all?